Well, when you think of southern Florida, you probably think of sandy beaches, but really these mangrove trees are what define the coast, and they're critically important, perhaps just as important as the coral reefs that we hear much more about because of their colorful fish. But the mangroves are sort of the nursery. Everything lives here, and well, you can see this is natural Florida coast. Very green, don't see a lot of sandy beaches. Goes all the way across here because this is protected area here in Biscayne National Park. We're here with Larry Perez, a park ranger here, and he's going to tell us a little bit about mangroves, which really don't get the attention they probably deserve. So can you tell us why the mangroves are so important?
Yeah, absolutely. Mangroves are essentially critical nursery for so many of our viable commercial and recreational fish species down here in South Florida. These mangroves serve as nursery grounds for their young stages in life. For us here living down in South Florida, these also have sort of a dual purpose. They're our first line of defense against hurricanes and other tropical storms as they roar ashore. So for that reason, all of the mangrove species down here in South Florida are actually protected by law.
Huh. And now these are sort of interconnected, right? Because people think, oh, there's the coral reefs, there's the turtle grass, there's the mangroves, they're three different things. But can you tell a little bit how they sort of connect together?
Absolutely. Again, these are nursery ground areas for the most part. So a lot of the species that we find out on the reef either come directly from the early life stages here in the mangroves or depend on organisms that originate here in the mangroves for their vitality offshore.
Wow, and what makes mangroves so important? I mean, why are they different than other trees?
You know, when we think about plants in general, we think plants can't do well around salt water. Down here in South Florida, we've got three well-known tree species that are very well adapted to life in salt water. We call them collectively mangrove, right? But these trees, these three individual species, aren't really botanically related. This is a word, mangrove, that we use generally across several different species to denote their ability to grow directly in or near salt water.
Wow, okay, well, let's take a look at them. Thanks. Okay, so what's that one that's way out in the water with the big roots?
Out in the distance, you see our walking tree. At least that's the way some folks down here refer to it. That's our red mangrove, and it's very characteristic what you're seeing right there. Those wide arching prop roots coming out on either side of it, really helping to stabilize that tree as it grows right at the edge of the ocean. Wow. Now that is growing in pure salt water right there, or at least estuarine waters. An environment that most plants and trees probably couldn't grow in. And it does just fine, and the way it does that is by using those prop roots to keep out the salt as it takes in the water. It's literally able to sift between the two right through its own roots.
Okay, and as we go further up, let's see, do you have any other species visible here?
Yeah, in fact, if you look further into the shoreline, there's actually a tree here growing right next to it with sort of rounded leaves. Yeah. And that tree that you've got with rounded leaves is our second species of mangrove on the coast. We usually find them growing behind the red mangroves up near the water's edge. This is our white mangrove. And the white mangrove also is well adapted to a life in salt water, except this tree actually does take in the salt as it takes that salt water in and extrudes it through glands on either side of its leaf. A unique strategy.
Right, and you can kind of see the salt right on the backs of the leaves, right?
You can sometimes with this particular species, but where you really see it most is on the black mangrove.
Okay, and where's the black?
We actually have one example hanging out right back there.
I know, you'd think there'd be lots of those because those are usually the next ones back, yeah, right?
Typically they are.
Behind the red.
We've got a lone sentinel right here. This is our black mangrove. They get their name because as they get a little bit older, these trunks will actually get much, much wider and actually grow very dark black in color. But these guys also have a pretty unique strategy. They also will extrude salt through their leaves, and the backside of these leaves is usually crystallized with salt. If it hasn't been raining around here for a long time and wash the salt off the leaves, you can literally get a nice hit of salt just by licking the edge of these leaves.
Wow, that's great. Thank you. Great. And we got these things growing out of the ground, which I understand are called pneumatophores. What do they do?
Yeah, that's exactly right. You're probably familiar with cypress knees elsewhere in the southeastern United States, where cypress trees will actually grow these cypress knees close by, and they stick up out of the water. It's the same strategy here on the coast. During high tides, these areas will largely be inundated with salt water, and so these pneumatophores, as they stick up from the water, assist the plant with gas exchange, supplement what it's able to do elsewhere in the plant.
I see. Okay, so they're like snorkels, kind of.
You got it. It's exactly right.
Great. Thank you. These mangroves are every bit as vital as the coral reefs that we hear so much about. And the southern Florida ecosystem would be desolate without them. And so really, I'm hoping that this BioBlitz will make people more aware of their importance. And they'll think about that when they think about protecting the coast, when they talk about zoning, putting houses close to the coast. Because the more we do of that, the fewer we have of the seafood that we need to eat, the fewer we have of the fish that we like to see out at the coral reef, and the more species we're just destroying on this planet.